The charity event at the Grand Hotel was supposed to run smoothly, just like every year. Expensive lights hung from the ceiling, shining on polished floors that reflected every movement. Expensive suits and dresses filled the hall as wealthy guests arrived one by one, greeting each other with practiced smiles. They walked in with confidence, talking loudly about business deals, travel plans, and the latest things they had bought. Their laughter echoed across the room, mixing with the clinking of glasses. Everything looked perfect from the outside. Among the staff rushing around to keep the event running, there was a quiet young waitress. Everyone simply called her the girl from the evening shift because most of the guests never bothered to ask her name. She moved with gentle steps, balancing trays of drinks and helping wherever she was needed. She did not speak much, but her calm smile made her easy to work with. No one in the hall knew that behind that quiet smile lived a very different story. As she walked past the long marble table, she glanced for a second at the grand piano standing in the corner of the hall. It was a beautiful black piano, shining under the soft lights. For a moment she paused without realizing it. Her fingers twitched slightly, as if they remembered something from long ago, but she quickly looked away and continued her work. She didn't want anyone to notice her staring. Most of the elite guests didn't even look at her. Some gave her short instructions: more water here, please clear this, bring me another napkin, without making eye contact. A few looked at her with the kind of expression that said she was invisible. She had grown used to it. She simply kept working, doing her best to remain polite and focused. As the event moved toward the entertainment segment, the organizers suddenly went into panic. The pianist booked for the night had sent a message saying he couldn't make it due to a sudden medical emergency. The director of the event felt his chest tighten with stress. Everything was planned. The guests were expecting a performance, and now he had nothing to offer them. He looked around, frustrated, and began scolding the staff even though it wasn't their fault. The guests noticed something was wrong. Some whispered, "What is happening?" Others complained loudly, wondering how such an expensive event could have such poor management. A few laughed in a mocking way, saying the organizers should have hired better people. The director kept running around in circles, trying to find anyone who could play even a simple tune-even background music. One of the staff members, an older waiter, tried to help by suggesting they could put on recorded music for a while, but the guests overheard and immediately rejected the idea. They said it would make the event look cheap. The director grew even more stressed, wiping sweat from his forehead. Everyone around him felt the tension. It was only then that the quiet young waitress gathered the courage to speak. She walked slowly toward the director and said in a soft voice, "Sir, if you want, I can play for a little while. Just until you find someone." The director stared at her as if she had told a joke. Some nearby guests turned their heads, surprised that a waitress even dared to speak at that moment. "You?" The director said with a half-laugh. "You think you can play the piano at this kind of event?" A few guests heard this and chuckled lightly. One whispered, "Maybe she thinks this is a school talent show." Another shook his head, saying he had never heard something so funny at a charity event. The girl lowered her eyes. She felt embarrassed for even trying to help. But she didn't walk away. She simply stood there quietly, waiting for the director to calm down. One of the chefs from the kitchen overheard and stepped out. He had worked with her for months and had once seen her practicing on an old piano in the staff area. He spoke up for her, saying, "Sir, I've heard her play before. She's actually really good." But the director waved his hand as if brushing away dust. "Good for where? A hotel lobby?" he said sharply. "This is an elite event? We need real performers." The girl felt a sting in her heart, but she kept her expression neutral. She didn't want to argue or defend herself. She just wanted to help. Another staff member insisted again, saying, "Sir, we really have no one else. At least let her try. If she can't do it, we can stop." The director looked around the hall, saw the impatient faces of the wealthy guests, and realized he had no choice. He didn't want to risk another wave of complaints. With a frustrated sigh, he said, "Fine, go, just don't embarrass us." The girl nodded gently. She placed the tray she was holding on a side table, wiped her hands on her apron carefully, and walked toward the grand piano. Each step felt heavier than the last. She could feel dozens of eyes on her, some curious, some doubtful, some amused. She reached the piano and stood in front of it for a moment. Her heart beat loudly inside her chest, but her face remained calm. She slowly pulled the bench out and sat down. For the first time that night, the hall grew quiet, not out of respect, but out of curiosity. Many guests leaned forward slightly, eager to witness what they believed would be an awkward moment. A few even whispered to each other, joking that this might be one of the biggest mistakes the event had ever made. The director stood at the back, rubbing his temples, believing he had made a terrible decision. The girl took a slow breath. Her eyes softened as she looked at the keys. Memories rushed in her childhood home filled with soft sunlight. The old piano her grandfather had gifted her. The sound of her mother humming while she practiced. The competitions she had once entered, the achievements she used to dream about. She remembered how everything changed when her family went through difficult times. She had stopped playing not because she lost interest, but because life demanded she worked instead of followed her passion. Her hands hovered above the keys. She felt the smooth surface beneath her fingertips, familiar even after years away. For a moment, the noise of the world faded. The hall, the guests, the director, the whispers, they all vanished from her mind. The only thing that existed was the piano. She closed her eyes for a second, letting her breath settle. When she opened them again, there was a quiet determination in her gaze. She no longer cared who was watching or what they expected. She just wanted to play, not to prove anything, not to impress anyone. But simply because playing the piano had once been her way of breathing, the guests leaned even closer, waiting for the mistake they assumed was coming. The director held his breath. The staff peeked from behind the curtains, and then with calm, steady fingers, she pressed the first note. The sound floated into the air, soft, clear, and beautiful in a way no one in the room had expected. At that exact moment, every whisper stopped. Every laugh faded. Every doubt froze, and before anyone could understand what was happening, she began to play. The first note she played felt like a soft breeze moving gently across the hall. It surprised everyone because they expected something shaky or unsure, but instead the sound was warm and steady. For a moment, nobody understood what they were hearing. They had come prepared to witness an awkward attempt, but this was something entirely different. She continued playing, letting her fingers move with a grace she hadn't shown in years. The melody grew richer, flowing from one note to another like water. It was gentle at first, then slowly filled with strength and emotion. The hall, which had been filled with noise and complaints just minutes earlier, was now silent. Every guest was watching her with wide eyes. A woman in a silver dress stopped mid-sip, completely frozen by the unexpected beauty of the music. A man seated near the front leaned forward, trying to understand how a simple waitress could play like that. One guest whispered to his friend, "Is this really the same girl who was serving water?" At the back of the hall, the director stood still with his mouth slightly open. He had expected embarrassment, maybe even disaster. But what he witnessed was the exact opposite. Each note she played made him feel smaller, more guilty for how he had spoken to her earlier. He realized he had judged her without knowing anything about her. Her fingers moved confidently across the keys. She looked like she belonged there, as if the piano recognized her hands and welcomed them back. She didn't force anything. She simply let the music guide her, letting her emotions flow through the instrument. It wasn't just talent. It was years of hidden passion finally finding space to breathe again. As the song grew deeper, the guests felt something shift inside the room. The melody carried feelings of hope, sadness, strength, and memories all at once. Some guests who had come with bored expressions now looked moved, touched in a way they couldn't explain. A man known for being arrogant lowered his gaze, suddenly feeling humbled. A woman who had earlier laughed at her now looked close to tears. The staff watched from the corners with quiet pride. Many of them had never seen this side of her. They knew she was polite and hardworking, but they never imagined she carried such a beautiful gift within her. A few of them exchanged looks, Wondering why she never talked about her talent. At one of the tables sat a well-known music producer, someone who rarely showed emotion. But as he listened, he felt something shift inside him too. Her playing reminded him of the early days of his career when he used to search for true, raw talent, not the kind filtered through fame and money, but the kind that came straight from the heart. He felt a strange excitement building inside him, like he had just discovered something precious. The piece grew stronger and more powerful. The music filled every corner of the hall, touching people who normally never felt moved by anything at events like these. It felt as though the piano had been waiting for her all night, waiting for her to bring it to life. Her eyes were slightly closed, not fully, but enough to show she was lost in the world of the melody. She remembered dreams she had once allowed herself to have, dreams of standing on big stages, playing for large audiences, sharing her heart through music. She remembered the people who once supported her, the people she lost, and the sacrifices she had made. All of that emotion poured into her performance. The guests could feel it too. Even though they didn't know her story, her music told it for her. It was honest, human, and full of emotion they couldn't ignore. Closer to the end of the piece, her fingers slowed down. The melody softened again, becoming delicate and tender. The room felt like it was holding its breath. Nobody moved, nobody blinked. They didn't want to miss a single second. Finally, she pressed the last note, soft, gentle, and full of feeling. Then silence, a thick, almost heavy silence, filled the hall. It lasted only a moment, but it felt long to everyone in the room. They had no words because they had not expected anything like what they had just heard. And then, all at once, the applause began. It wasn't polite clapping. It was loud, powerful, and full of genuine appreciation. People stood up from their seats, cheering and clapping with excitement. Some even whistled, something rarely done at formal events. The entire hall seemed alive with energy. The girl looked up in surprise. She had expected nothing, maybe silence, maybe confused looks, but she never expected the crowd to react like this. Her eyes widened, and for the first time that evening, she smiled in a way that came straight from her heart. The director rushed forward, his previous arrogance completely gone. He approached her with a mixture of shock and regret. I'm sorry, he said softly, unable to find better words. I had no idea. She nodded politely, accepting the apology. She didn't hold any anger in her eyes. She wasn't thinking about his rude words anymore. She was still lost in the afterglow of her performance. Guests surrounded her, each trying to speak to her first. They asked where she had learned to play, how long she had been hiding this talent, and why she was working as a waitress instead of being a performer. She answered politely, keeping her words simple, grateful for their kindness, but not overwhelmed by it. Many offered compliments, but she remained humble. The music producer approached her slowly, waiting for the crowd to calm down. When he finally reached her, he spoke gently. You're playing... It's rare, he said, choosing his words carefully. I haven't heard something so honest in many years. She looked at him with curiosity but didn't say anything. He continued, If you're willing, I would like to help you. Your talent shouldn't be hidden in the corner of a hall. It deserves a stage. The girl felt her breath catch for a moment. She didn't know what to say. For years, she had locked this dream away, thinking it was impossible. Yet here was someone offering her a chance she thought she would never get again. Before she could respond, the staff members came toward her, smiling proudly. They congratulated her, saying how honored they were to work with her. Some even told her they had always sensed there was something special about her. Even if they didn't know what it was, the guests continued applauding, refusing to let the moment end. Many of them had come to the event thinking they had seen everything in life, believing nothing could surprise them anymore. But this simple, quiet waitress had reminded them that real beauty often comes from the most unexpected places. The director announced to the crowd, Ladies and gentlemen, I think we have discovered the true star of the night. The hall filled with another round of applause. The girl felt shy but grateful. She looked around the room, seeing people smiling, clapping, and looking at her not as a waitress, but as an artist. It was a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. For once, she felt seen. The music producer waited until she had a quiet moment and said again, "Think about my offer. You don't have to decide now, but trust me, the world needs to hear you." She nodded softly, unable to hide the hope forming in her chest. Later that night, when the event ended and the guests slowly left the hall, she walked past the piano one more time. She touched the keys gently, thanking them silently. Then she stepped away, carrying with her a new possibility. The elite had walked in thinking she was just a waitress, but by the end of the night, they had witnessed something unforgettable. And for the first time in a long time, she felt her life opening into something new, something filled with music, hope, and the kind of dreams she thought she had lost forever.